Thank you. It is a great pleasure to be here and to have this opportunity. I think I began coming to the COGA meetings in 2004. So I guess this would be my 15th anniversary, so I hope there will be a cake or something nice to celebrate that. But I have learned so much, and I really appreciate the company and the friendships I've made here. This is our session, Building Social Capital, and it is about safety and workplace well-being. I am an armchair quarterback. As you know, I'm an historian. I'm not really qualified in your world of engineering and science. And as an armchair quarterback, certain things I get to say, which I will now just remark, that it would seem like the title of our session, Having Social Capital, that would be easy, because this is an industry that produces a commodity that millions of Americans rely on as a bedrock of their well-being. So why would there have to be any effort to acquire social capital when you were doing something so essential? That should be sufficient to confirm the importance and value of your work. And yet the problem of social capital is, as many people have said, the phrase often used here is that this industry faces political, cultural, and regulatory challenges. So that's where social capital, that's where the rubber meets the road on social capital. I think I can say this without awkwardness here, that we live now in 2019 in a civic environment in which skepticism and distrust are omnipresent. It is a cynicism-saturated environment. And that makes the work of this panel an important cultural moment, because to say what is happening in the industry in the cause of workplace safety, worker safety, and worker well-being, to say that is to be instantly at risk in our climate of civic culture today, at risk of simply issuing a public relations statement, of simply saying, here's some good news that doesn't get told. In fact, this is good news that doesn't get told as often as it should, but I want to be the one to say that this is a complicated act to put forward the good work without then having a tide of skepticism come upon us. So I am putting myself forward to receive that tide of skepticism, which I hope you'll appreciate that I thought I would just step forward and do that, because that is the climate that we live in. And in fact, what several people have said here at this conference is this is a time for other messengers to be involved and to step forward. And in some ways, everything everyone will say today is very important, but hearing testimony from many different circles is really important on this as well. So, okay, so the speakers are, next to me, Britt Howard, who is Group Director of Assurance at Worley, and then Eric Jacobsen, who is Senior Vice President of Operations at Extraction Oil and Gas, and Chip Reimer, who is Chief Operating Officer at Whiting Petroleum Corporation. I have maybe one or two more opening remarks to make, and then we'll get right in there. I would like to say that Lieutenant Colonel Jason Harris did us a wonderful service by being here and speaking to us, and he certainly gave us a very good framework for this panel, which I had not asked him to do, but he just stepped forward and did that for us. With the loadmaster idea of the way you have to be a team, the way you have to have your loadmaster speaking and telling you what you cannot see for yourself and being in communication with you, what that means for a team, his phrase, what they see that you need to see, these channels, that channel of communication is so central to the work that people are going to be reporting here. So as our Lieutenant Colonel told us, the people you work with know that you have their back, and then you know that they have your back, and that is the reciprocity that makes this thing come together. And when I asked him that question of didn't he have the advantage of these things being matters of life and death, so that people's attention was so focused on the need to be a team, well, this can be a matter of life and death. And when I asked that question, I think I had separated his zone from ours there. So it is really a pleasure for me to be here with this team of qualified, experienced, wise. You're up to that? Okay, they're laughing at me. They're laughing at me. I called them wise, and they laughed at me. I don't know why that happened, but they're good-hearted, and they have robust senses of humor, too, so which is part of their wisdom. So, gentlemen, we'll start with you, and we're going to have 5-minute statements from each person and then get into more of a dialogue and conversation. Also, you are to know that you have cards at your table, and you should be writing any questions that come up as you hear these statements, and then good souls from Koga will come around and pick them up and bring them to me. And I brought my glasses so I can actually do something besides be puzzled by your comments or questions. Okay, Britt.
Thank you, Patty. Again, my name is Britt Howard. I work for Worley. I work in the insurance group, which is HSC, Quality, and Risk. I spent 28 years working in the petrochemical industry, 14 of those specifically in oil and gas, not only in Colorado, but throughout the United States and also around the country. The idea of the importance of social capital within the communities that we work and some of us live is profoundly important to me. I actually grew up beside a petrochemical facility. 17 years of my life was right beside a major plant, employed 4,000 to 5,000 work family members at a time. And I remember the things that they used to do to authentically create and to nurture relationships with the community at large. I've worked for 8 different global petrochemical companies now. And some of those companies invested the time and energy to develop the social capital that is necessary to develop the advocates, the authentic advocates of the oil and gas companies, producers, operators, whether it's a refinery or whether it's a fracking operation or whether it's a chemical plant. And that's why I'm here. I was a part of the group that helped develop the title and the topic and that paragraph that all of you had the opportunity to read, because this started out as a safety leadership symposium, and it organically turned into something that is still leadership, but it's about being leadership out in the community. It's about being authentic leaders in the community where we can share the fantastic things that we're doing around worker family safety and health and how it lends itself to improving safety and health within the communities that we serve in as far as work and or live. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you. Eric.
Great. Thanks, Patty, for the introduction. It's really a pleasure to be up here with Britt, who I've just come to know today, and his experience and professionalism, and very much a pleasure to be up here with Chip Reimer, who I've worked with in the past and who I hold in high esteem as an outstanding people and safety leader with very much a caring attitude. So real privilege to be here on the panel, and thanks to Koga.
Thanks, Eric.
As Patty mentioned, I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations at Extraction Oil and Gas. I've been around the world in 25, 26 years to places like Algeria and Azerbaijan and the North Slope of Alaska, Gulf of Mexico. And everywhere, safety and social capital and environmental and health performance has been imperative and first and foremost, but never has it all come together into the utmost of importance as it has here in Colorado. And we, Extraction Oil and Gas, we're a pure player in the DJ Basin of Colorado. We've been around since about 2013. We went public in 2016. And we've always held ourselves pride. We've had much pride in our efficiency and our technology and doing things differently. And certainly at the top of the list, our safety performance as it relates to working with communities and keeping our employees, our contractors, and all of our stakeholders safe. And safety is the cornerstone, as we see it, of our social license to operate here in Colorado. And we're proud of our safety performance over the last many years in terms of being among the safest of an already safe industry. I think we all have to do a better job of messaging just the good things that we do as we strive to continuously improve. This is an industry that's decreased its recordable rate by 41% in the last decade, where the rest of private enterprise has decreased by 28%. The Bureau of Labor Statistics ranks oil and gas extraction 7th safest out of 83 different industries that they categorize. We're in there with like data processing and florists and that sort of category. So we're number 7 out of 83, and I think we should take great pride in that. And our incident rate has gone down, our emissions have gone down in the last decade as we've doubled the number of drilling rigs and the workforce in this business. And as extraction goes, we're very proud that we've worked 1.5 million man-hours without a single OSHA employee recordable for extraction employees. We're an environmental gold leader recognized by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, one of only 2 oil and gas companies on that whole list. We've received a platinum rating in our surface facilities by an independent rating agency, IAS Trustwell. And we've worked collaboratively in an unprecedented fashion with communities in establishing operator agreements and best practices and innovations. And those are some of the things that underpin our safety program, just getting a little bit into the nuts and bolts of kind of our safety principles and environmental and health. And the umbrella of it is the safety culture, and it started with the leaders and the people in this company who believe to their core that safe delivery of our operations and doing what we say is fundamental to our business. And once we embed that into the beliefs and decision making of our employees and our employers and our employees and our contractors, then we start looking at sort of what are the principles that underpin our safety program. And I would say that technology and innovation is one. We're drilling 3-mile laterals now. We have tankless facilities. We're using pipelines to get trucks off the road. We've cut methane emissions in Colorado in half as an industry while production has increased tenfold. So those sort of technologies and innovations are critical to us. And what those enable is an absolute fundamental principle, and I heard Britt say it already today, earlier, engineer out the hazard. First and foremost, if a hazard doesn't exist, it can't become an incident. We've taken away, one of my favorite examples are tanks, production tanks. And in our Broomfield agreement, we've taken away production tanks. And Chip did it, and Noble did it in Wells Ranch and elsewhere. If you eliminate the hazard, the incident can't occur. You take trucks off the road, you transport product by pipeline, you cut emission sources, you cut leak sources, all of the above by eliminating the hazard. So I think, and it just so happens that by eliminating the hazard, we become oftentimes more efficient and more cost-effective too, as a sort of a side benefit. Other components of our safety program that we believe firmly in and have applied here in Colorado are leaders who are fully engaged in the field. We don't employ supervisors to sit behind a desk and code invoices. We employ people who are going to get out in the field and put a critical eye on the operations, engage contractors, engage the workforce, and have what I call almost like a healthy paranoia around what could go wrong and making a difference. And so those are the sorts of leaders that we insist upon and we think are foundational to a safety program. I'd say another piece of our safety program that it might sound a bit boring, but it's pivotal, fit-for-purpose standards and practices. We're not looking for 100-page manuals to dig a trench, but we are looking for fit-for-purpose standards on hot work and energy isolation and excavation and trenching and working at heights and driving and all those things that are kind of really critical elements to a safety program. And I think that fit-for-purpose element is really important. We also pride ourselves and take great stock in learning and applying lessons. And I should emphasize the applying part of lessons. It's one thing to learn a lesson, it's another to apply it deeply into your safety program. Are you really getting to the point where you're not going to relearn that lesson again? Somebody said in this business, we seldom, if ever, learn new lessons. We just relearn old ones that we failed to pay attention to. And so that's important to us. And we take, again, great effort and great strides to learn and apply lessons. And then lastly, a big part of our safety program and in building this social capital and working with communities is just simply listening. Listening to our employees, whether it's a green hat or a seasoned wise veteran, whether it's a community member, whether it's a contractor, we listen with this bias towards continuous improvement. And that sort of underpins, that continuous improvement bias underpins the foundation. So those are some elements that I feel just off the top are important in the safety program to build social capital. And with that, I'll pass it on to Chip.
Great. Thank you. Chip.
Thank you, Eric. That was great.
No,
I
thanks.
could ditto a bunch of that. Really thank Koga, thank them for the invite to be able to talk on this subject. I think it's a really important subject. Look forward to the discussion with Britt and Eric here. Eric and I have a past and really enjoyed working with him, and I know he's very passionate about it also. So, and Patty, thank you for being our moderator. Really appreciate it. So, I was trying to think, 37 years in the industry, all operations for myself, all over the world. Been very passionate around operations, the safety piece of it. That's my bread and butter. I've seen too many incidents in the past. I don't think our generation did a very good job. My generation, as you point to, I'm old. My old generation.
I didn't say old. I said wise.
But I can remember. Yeah, wise. Okay, wise and old. They weren't that wise maybe a few years ago. You've seen a huge change in how we manage safety and how we manage the environment and how we talk about ourselves. It was just trust us. We're doing the right thing. 10, 20, 30 years ago. We just didn't do a very good job on the PR side. And now I think it's how do you build that trust and how do you gain that trust? And we've lost a lot of that. We've let the other side take control of that. And so I'm really excited about being here and listening to how you guys build your cultures, your safety cultures. I think it's really important. I think it's how you do the little things, and I think it's how you do the big things that matters. I'm very passionate about leadership in the field. It's critical, and you know, and Patty said, "I have your back." I was just in the field last week, sitting down with a workover rig group, and they're looking at me eye to eye in a little doghouse that's probably not as big as this stage, half this stage, with, you know, 8 burly guys with sweat and grease and dirt on them. Look at me eye to eye. Do you believe in the safety that you're preaching? It's about making connections. It's a 4-letter word, care. Do I care about you? We had a gentleman out there, and I was with my safety guy and another operations guy, and the guy says, "You know what? I just met you 20, 30 minutes ago, but I care about you. I may not see you again, but I care about you. And that's why we're so passionate about you. I want you to go home with all your fingers and toes. I want you to go home back just as you came that day." And it's a connection. To me, it's a connection around people. We don't talk about our rules. We don't talk about when first thing. We go around the room in that little doghouse. Tell me why you're here. Tell me who your family members are. Tell me why you work every day as hard as you do. I want to make that connection. And I want to know I have their back. I have their back to stop the job. I want to make that. I agree 100% with Eric says. Leadership has to be in the field. They got to know from the top all the way down. So, CEO for Whiting Petroleum, been there for about 8, 9 months now. I came over, operations experience, been up in Denver now for about 4 or 5 years. But you name it, across operations, from deep water to onshore to international, across the board. So I've seen a lot of operations in my career, and I'm very, very passionate about it. I do think that most of society doesn't understand the passion we have around making sure everybody goes home safely. We don't do a very good job, and they don't understand the efforts. And when you do go out and educate people and show people, they start to get it, and what we try to do every day to really connect with people and why we do certain things, why I do a job safety analysis when I first start and look at risk and hazards, because I care about you. I want you home every day. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. You know, Whiting has what they call life-saving rules. We have 9 life-saving rules that we really preach. I think those life-saving rules, we've learned from our history and our past. If you focus on those, it can really make a difference for somebody. And we like to focus on that and make sure it's connecting, and listening. Is it connecting? Are people understanding that? So I'll turn it over to Patty.
Well, thank you. I have questions that the panelists gave me, and a lot of them converge on the question which has come up, and Eric has certainly got us on a good start and maybe even completed the subject in some ways on this, but how to build a culture of safety in a systematic way. And the luncheon speaker talking about training as the key to that, that has suddenly made me curious about how you orchestrate training. I'm following up on your question here on how you instill values of safety in a way that doesn't make people so cautious that they actually are in danger because they're so, it seems like that could be a possibility. So how do you get that setting? And then a sort of sub-question, if something goes awry, which will happen with human beings, how do you take something that is either already an accident or could have been an accident and address that in a way that doesn't just kill the spirit of the person who was on the edge of a major screw up? Screw up is probably not the term used in the field. We'll just say there's probably a livelier, well, trying not to use an indelicacy.
Near miss.
Nobody's helped. A near miss. Well, it's still not the word. I had a, well, okay, sorry, not to belabor that. I was just trying to fit into the field was all I was trying to do there. So anyway, so how do you instill that, and then how do you deal with the things that start to go awry? And this is the question I never thought to ask, but is it separate training on safety culture for the managers versus the actual hands-on workers? And I understand that that division is not supposed to be enormous, but do you have separate safety workshops and values sessions for the people who will be in the decision-making leadership thing, and then a different kind of safety training for the actual workers, or is that mixed together? Should it be mixed together? So, sorry, I put like 3 questions in here, but the big one is, how do you train for values of safety? How do you deal with accidents? And do you mix the population to have those workshops or episodes or leadership occasions? So, whatever order. Well, there you are. Hi.
You want me to answer?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll craft some of your questions. The first, I don't like to use the term training. I like to use the term knowledge and development, setting expectations. And to answer probably your 4th question was about, it's not separate. It's ingrained in everything. From the time that a new work family member walks through the gate and meets the CEO or the supervisor, that's a part of how we develop that caring attitude, that caring culture, that you're now a part of our work family. And we're going to do things the right way, the safe way. If anybody can hear my voice right now hinges some of their statements on applying common sense, I would challenge you to eliminate that from your vocabulary and embrace the concept of common knowledge, because all of us have different backgrounds of obviousness when it comes to training and what to expect. And it's not fair to me to expect for somebody to know something unless you know that knowledge has been shared. So training is a word that I don't like to use. This knowledge development, knowledge sharing. And to answer question number 2, is it separate development for work family members and supervisors? It can be, because the frontline supervisors have a different role. Everybody is important, but everybody does something a little bit different. What Chip did the other day in the doghouse is different than you would expect from a driller to do with his partners in planning out their work. So everybody's important, but everybody has a different role. But everybody lands on that same goal of going home safely.
Do you want to do my 15th question? It's the one about what to do to deal with something that's almost going wrong.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for bringing that up. So it's profoundly important from a leadership perspective to wait for all the information to get in and to systematically, how's our work family member doing? I understand we had an incident, or we almost had an incident, but tell me how Britt is doing right now. Are we providing him and his family, if applicable, the necessary resources for medical treatment? Do we need to fly his wife in so she can be by his side? We'll get into the details of the incident. Is the incident scene safe for all of our other work family members? That should be first and foremost. And that goes a long way. I can't tell you how many times I get emails from around the world where he had an incident, and I'll write the response and I'll go back and the first thing I need to ask, how is our work family member doing? This other stuff's important. We had a dropped object. Larry smashed his hand. We had a fire. How are our work family members? Because you put something in writing, it's going to be circulated everywhere. Or if you're recorded, it's going to be circulated everywhere. You want to send the right message. So, not to jump to conclusions, to make sure that we are showing that we care about our work family members first and foremost is how I believe we should respond to incidents.
Really good, thank you. Chip, and then we'll come back.
Want to go?
Yeah.
I'll go. So if we have an incident, I have what's so-called as a 30-minute chip meeting. So, and whether it's a positive one or a negative one. So if someone stops the job and they do something that is admirable about having enough guts to say, stop the job, I don't understand something, I want to be able to see them and talk to them and thank them. Okay, so it's a positive and a negative. So if we have an incident or a near miss, then I want to sit down with the individuals involved, also the service providers, and I ask that if I'm going to spend time as leadership, I want to see the leadership from the service provider. I demand that they're there at that same meeting. I want to understand their culture. I want to see where they are. Now, first of all, when we first start this meeting, to your point, how's the individual doing? Where are they? What's going on? That's the first thing you ask. Okay? Because it's a work family. You sit in that doghouse and they talk about their work family. These guys love each other. They work together. They're probably together more than they are with their families. So you want to understand that. So that's for me is understand it. Then we pick up those lessons learned, and then we call what's tier one. How can we engineer out? If we had an issue, how do we engineer? What can we do to make it safer so it doesn't happen again? That's really some of the drivers. And so you're creating that lessons learned, feeding back. You have everybody in these meetings that can disseminate that information and be able to use it. We also do safety alerts and those kind of things, but I really think it's important that you're literally eye to eye, face to face, talking to people and seeing people as you're seeing, you're going through the process. So that's the things that I like to do. I think it's a connection with people going forward. So, training, education, we go through a lot of effort to try to make sure everybody understands our processes, our procedures, where we're going, why we're doing them, why we have standard operating procedures, why we do a JSA or job safety analysis to understand those kind of things. Continue education, and I think it's a positive and negative, Patty, when you look at it.
So, Eric, do you want to chime in on?
Sure. I think your original question was around culture. Do you train to establish culture? And I think training is a part of it. If you want to call it knowledge development or training, it's a small part of it. But really, culture is such a big topic, and it's really hard to define. It's kind of like, how do you feel about? How does it feel to work in this environment? What is your sense around? Is safety really a priority or community engagement? And I guess somebody said culture is the sum total of the values, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors of an organization. Mm-hmm. But it's really, to me, all of the small things that underpin that. Do leaders get out in the field? Are you asking questions around environmental health, safety with your people? What leaders pay attention to, measure, and control tends to be what's important to them. If you go out and ask nothing about cost and productivity, never about safety, then it's a sign of culture from the leadership. Are your field leaders spending time in the field? Are they listening? Do you have a contractor program where you really value those partnerships? Are you taking care of people when things happen to them? Are you following up deeply and learning and applying lessons, as I said earlier? Does your board of directors ask about environmental health and safety? It just so happens that our board of directors, when I give updates quarterly, we spend more time on environmental health and safety than any other topic. So that shows me where safety sits in our company and community engagement. So those are all the things, are your people really engaged? Are they out there making a difference? Are they proud of the positive stories that they're how do you reward employees? So all of those things, I think, make up a culture. And training is part of it, but it goes well beyond that from our perspective.
A couple of you proposed the topic, and it seems an important one, of your relationships with contractors on safety matters. And I will say, as a person who came into this territory years ago, I thought, oh yeah, contractors. I wasn't paying, from the outside, I was not paying, I didn't know really to even ask myself the question about that. So I think that is really an important aspect of public communications as well, but also quite a complicated aspect of your plans and operations. So could, in whatever order you'd like, could you say something about contractors and standards of safety that you, I don't know what I should say, demand, require, expect, what the right verb there should be. So shall we reverse?
I'll start. We'll start with Whiting's. Let's just start with values. I love the subject on values and creating culture and living values from the top all the way to the bottom. And whatever decision you make, whatever you do, you're living your values. So, we had our values at Whiting were created by the employees. It wasn't driven from above. It's what are the values of the company. So they literally own and breathe these values. And they had one of them was safety always. You know, when I got there 8-9 months ago, I saw safety always, and I've always been, you know, safety's on top, always on top. And they said, no, safety's our foundation. Safety is on the bottom. And I really love that thought process. And they had effective communication, engaged leadership, integrity, all these things that you listened. They were all really good. So you're looking for contractors that have similar values, similar cultures. And that's really what, because they, as far as they're extension of us, what we do, okay? And I love in partnership. I believe in partnerships. You build partnerships. There's a value creation when you have a partnership. It's not about one thing or the other. It's about the whole gamut when you're getting a value. And that's the direction we love to go when I got service providers. And then if there is an incident, like I said before, I want to sit in front, face to face, with that leadership, and tell me what we're going to do differently. And I want to make sure I understand what I'm aligning with someone who has the same values as I have, and our company has, and where we want to go. And I want to make sure everybody goes home safely. That's the ultimate goal. I've been in too many situations. And I'll tell you what, I'll tell you a quick story. A guy, he's on a rig, he gets caught between two pieces of pipe. I get a call from our drilling manager. The drilling manager says, we got someone injured, okay. But this drilling manager knew the individual, he knew he had a family, knew he had a couple kids, and they were getting ready to go to, and I told the story before, they were getting ready to go to Disney World the next day. Okay, and so I'm thinking, if I was this gentleman's wife, I'd be, you know, first of all, they were all excited. Everybody's excited. They're getting ready to go to Disney World the next day. They're getting ready to go to Disney World the next day, and all of a sudden they get this call. Dad is injured. They're not sure if Dad's going to make it or not make it or whatever the case may be. So you can imagine the kids, same thing, excitement. And now all of a sudden they're just worried about Dad. Well, they find Dad, they get Dad, he's going to be okay. But then you look at it, and now Dad's going to be okay, but now the trip has to be canceled. So they just lost the memories. I don't know if they were going to Disney World again, but the pictures that they were going to have, the memories that they were going to have, those kind of things are gone. I'm not going to stand for that. I want to see people have the same caring culture that I have, and we're going to drive that. And that, if you find that values and you live those values every day, you don't move from those values. That's the people I want to surround.
I'm going to come in with the question that I was just handed because it so directly comes off of where you just were there. So anybody I'm interrupting who wanted to say something on this question, you'll come back to that. So here's the question. I heard you talking a lot about emotional health caring when it comes to safety in the workplace. Do you think public perception could evolve if people knew that that was a part of our training standards? And I guess I'm going to push this a little bit further of saying more open discussion of emotion in public. Would that be... your story there had that.
Yeah.
And I heard here at a dinner years ago, I heard a woman whose father had worked in the industry. She was very involved as well. And she told a story about her father having had a very bad thing happen under his supervision, very bad thing. And she told us about that and what it was like to live with a father who, as an engineer, had had that. And that has lasted for me, and it certainly was... she didn't rush away from that. She stayed in that whole how can we make it better thing. But I'm just wondering about the ways in which hard-driving corporate leaders are not to be weeping in public. They're not to be thinking about children at Disney World. Is there something that you should be pushing back against those constraints, as you just did by telling that story? Are those constraints standing in the way of this whole matter of having the public understand you better? Should we hear more about that world of human-to-human connection and the intensity of that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, if I could take a crack?
Sure.
Okay. So I think yes is the short answer to the question. And an example that comes to my mind from our experience at Extraction is we became very transparent and public about an incident we had in the Windsor area. There was a fire. It was contained to the pad and it never impacted the public. We were able to extinguish it in a matter of hours, but nonetheless, of the 20 people on location, one was injured fairly severely. Happy to report he's fully recovered now. But that was a pivotal event in our company's history. I think it changed us for the better forever, as hard as it was for that incident to occur. We really looked deep inside of our own leadership, and myself and people who reported to me, about what we are not doing, or what we are doing to allow that to happen, and that we cannot ever allow it to happen again. And we were at the time negotiating an operator agreement with the city of Broomfield, and they asked us repeatedly about that, and we owned up. We faced the music, and we became very transparent about that. We had 15 different items that we changed in our company. We established a new department with a new leader over that particular. It was temporary flowback, put in fit-for-purpose standards and practices, designed out hazards wherever we could, all these different things that we did. And we've since been asked about it at the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission repeatedly. We've been asked about it in other communities repeatedly, and it was an incident where it's emotional to talk about and difficult, and I think all of us in our company have vowed that that will never happen to us again. But I think it has helped us sort of ensure that we're following up properly, and that we're taking that lesson to heart to as deeply as we can, and being transparent with the public about our mistakes. But we're also talking a lot about what we did to fix it. And knock on wood, it hasn't happened since in that same operation. So I think there is something to that, Patty. And transparency is okay, and at the same time, I think we have to, as an industry, be more transparent about the good things we do too, and about how we've cut methane emissions in half, and how we've put together operator agreements that take 2.5 years to negotiate, with best-in-class practices and protections and designs and engineering and all the things we do that we could sit up here and list dozens and dozens of things in our programs that make us safe and make the environment clean and healthy around us.
Audience, if you are writing questions, wave them around so that they can be brought to me, because that was a good one and took us in a
Very good one.
useful direction. So yeah, Britt, do you want to?
Yeah, I want to get some input as well. So on the stories that both Chip and Eric shared, was in response. There are also proactive opportunities where we can get our stories out. Being authentic in showing how we work. Not too far from here, 3 years ago, my work family and my personal family helped paint the exterior of a community center, just 3 or 4 miles from here. And before we started work, we all got together and we had a toolbox meeting. Not the company I was working for, the people that were there to participate, including my 3 teenage boys and my wife, and community outreach people that were there. And then we followed a job safety analysis. And we watched each other and had each other's back when somebody was going to use a bucket to gain access to something that was at height. Everybody had the opportunity and the responsibility to stop work. So there are opportunities to show and to develop that social capital proactively as well. That we just don't talk about the output of what we do at work by minimizing emissions and injuries, but we show it in how we actually live in our communities.
Great. I do have a couple of questions here. I want to, though, quickly, because I have your questions, which I have not attended to as thoroughly as I should. I have not said, there's a number of questions that you have about applying these concerns about safety proactively and responsively if there is a problem to neighboring communities. So I'd like to do a quick round on that, on how, and I would like to preface that by saying it is my impression that one of the most complicated and challenging fields of expertise to communicate is public health studies involving proximity to oil and gas industries, that those have a significant margin of error that often doesn't get noted in public. It's about probabilities. It's not about that. You cannot run an experiment where you have a community live in proximity and keep fans just blowing that direction. So it's a very fraught area of public communication, public health studies of neighboring communities. And to be dismissive of communities' concerns, that's not working, and that's not happening now. So could you speak about how these safety concerns that we've been chatting about with workers, how that plays out in relationships with communities, especially given how fraught public health studies are?
You probably.
Okay.
You're living right there in the
You
community.
have a cracker.
Sure, you can go there.
So that's our niche. We're in urban areas and work with communities. I think we work at Extraction with 18 different communities, maybe even 20 of some nature. So I would say, there's certainly the communication and open door listening avenue. What are their concerns? How can we apply best practices and technology and best-in-class operator agreements, removing tanks and using pipelines where there's sufficient scale to do so. Not always, but where there is, we like to use those. We plug and reclaim the old vertical legacy wells in the area as we come in with new pads. We drill 3-mile laterals so we can reduce the pad sizes. We locate, as far as reasonably possible from occupied residents. We follow standards from 9 different state and federal agencies with whom we have to comply, and we go above and beyond that. We actually clean up the air by removing some of these old vertical wells and applying new technology. So those are all the things that we've arrived at where there's scale to do so. It's sort of a toolbox. Not every tool is needed for every job, but sometimes all the tools are needed, depending on where you're at and what the community's concerns are. And so we've established this toolbox. We've been able to apply in listening to the community. And so there's a big element of listening, applying, where we can, accounting for the public's concerns. But there's also an element where frankly, data and objective data and analysis has to come to play. And it is a fact that this industry in Colorado has reduced methane emissions by half in the last decade through a lot of engineering, a lot of technology, a lot of listening, and a lot of applying learnings. And I think when it comes to environmental health and safety, most of us view it as sort of a Commonwealth approach. What's good for one is good for the other, so we all learn from each other. It is a fact that in Weld County, where there are 20,000 plus legacy wells, the incidence of cancer and heart disease and cardiovascular disease are lower than neighboring communities. That's a public health fact. It is a public health fact that the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment in February of 2017 issued a report that said there is no incremental health risk living 500 feet or greater from a well. So I think it's a combination of listening, applying our technology and learnings, getting better from that all the time. But at the end of the day, you also need to take into account objective data and analysis in our decisions. Right now, just to wrap it up, in Broomfield, we're collecting reams of data. Broomfield, the community is, the state, Extraction. And so far, we haven't seen anything in terms of increased air emissions beyond background in any phase of our operation. So all of that data, nor noise, nor water, nor soil, eventually that data has to come to surface, and in our view, it's imperative that that's used in decision making and rule making in the future too, as we move forward with this continuous improvement under sort of a what makes practical sense framework.
Patty, can I add one thing onto that? It reminds me, and that was fantastic data that Eric just shared with all of us. It reminds me of a quote from Stephen Covey, and the quote is, "People don't care what you know until they know that you care."
Exactly.
And it's about engaging the communities in which we work and some of us live. So when that fantastic data is shared, it's embraced. And we develop advocates within the communities themselves, so Eric or Chip don't have to be present to share that type of fantastic data that is real, that has an impact on their safety and health out with the kids playing in the playground or at the school, that when somebody challenges it, they say, no, Eric or Chip or Patty brought this up, and I believe them because they care about us. People don't care what you know until they know that you care.
I would agree 100%, Britt. I think that's exactly right. We also have employees that live in all the backyards of all these oil and gas areas. We have employees that live there, okay? We have generations that have been generations of oil and gas people that have been here. So we take it very seriously to make sure that, there's environmental impacts, keeping everything in the pipe. We do that on a very serious basis to make sure. And you see people come back into this industry. My son works in this industry. If I thought there was an issue, I would not have my son in this industry. And you see that over and over and over. We have gas monitors on all our folks that are sitting out there to monitor to make sure there's no issues going forward. The public does not understand what's going on here. It's the stuff that these guys do a ton of stuff to make sure that everything around the communities around is safe. But what you have now is a different way to communicate. You have a social media that's out there, and you have people that sit in one realm, and that's all they live in that realm. And you have people on this side, and they sit in that realm, and they can really scare some people by some things that are not correct data. And that's the world we're into. And if you're sitting there as a mother or a father with children, you keep hearing this bad, even though you don't have good data, it starts scaring you. And that's what we have to overcome. That's what we have to get to, show that passion, show what it is. I've got people sitting right next to that wellhead every day who come back and have years and years, great careers, and they have their kids in there, okay? This is a great industry. It loves its people. It gives back, we give back numerous things, the little things. We give our field officers the chance to choose where they want to give money, social responsibility. We give 16 hours a year for employee to give, just go work, we pay it, you go out there and do it. You take 500 employees time, that's a full year at 24 hours a day that we give anything they want to go to give anything, any organization want to give back to the communities. We do the little things, we do the big things. We gave money for a hospital in Watford City where mothers could not give labor and delivery. There was no facility there. They had to drive. And so I think last year or a couple of years ago, there was a couple hundred kids born on roads or born in houses because they couldn't get to, in Denver, it's hard to believe that, but that's what's happening up in North Dakota. You're giving money and those kind of things. You're building the people that are going to talk the right thing because they understand how you give back to communities.
Some of the questions that I have here, a couple of them, are very directly related to what we're speaking of now. And this is, I think, a wonderful opportunity for us to think about the big framework of risk in society and what gets attention and arouses alarm and what doesn't. So last year, 632 people died on Colorado's roads. 6 people died in oil field accidents. I'm reading the question. Vehicle deaths are increasing while oil field deaths are decreasing, yet people are afraid of oil and gas. What's wrong with our messaging? But I'm going to annotate that question just to say, is that really a framework for human cognition about risk and danger? To say, you know, you shouldn't be frightened of the airplane because you're more at risk on the Denver-Boulder Turnpike. Has that ever made anyone feel better about flying who was nervous about flying? It just seems, I'm not in any way challenging the person asking this question, but just thinking, there's something in human consciousness that this is a very compelling set of numbers here, but does that get the message across? Or is there something more about, well, what everyone's been saying about listening, about really reckoning with the intense feeling of this? So it's pretty closely connected to another one here, but well, in fact, I think I'll put these two together. How does the industry get better at messaging the good we do? And this adds an important piece of the framework to put into your reflections as you think about this. Can you just use numbers as a form of saying, don't be so interested in risk there? But this one, this question adds, and how to counter the vocal anti-fossil fuel movement. And that I'm going to annotate by saying, good luck having a conversation about public health and safety without, in some way or another, getting prepared to go into the question of humanity over the long term and the combustion of fossil fuel. If it were, I mean, that's a Siamese twin situation. Those are so connected. That doesn't mean that they can't be addressed in separate and different ways, I guess. But so how about this messaging question, the question about quantifying different forms of risk and trying to introduce that into the conversation, plus how to bring in the issue of the continued combustion of fossil fuel as a public health issue at the same time? That is such an easy question. You're just going to...
Very easy question.
Yeah, right.
Well, Eric wants it.
I'll try to start with a couple of frames on that. So on the messaging, it's a hard one. It really is. As I mentioned before, we deal with 20 different communities, and in Broomfield, it took us 2.5 to 3 years of hours upon hours of public meetings, 1,500 pages of a comprehensive development plan, thousands of pages of permits, and eventually we get there. And we were able to, we started with a 9-0 vote, first vote of a moratorium against us ever drilling there in the history of our lives, and we're now drilling and hydraulically fracturing Broomfield, some great wells. And it was just a long process to get there. And it was a combination of caring, listening, data, engaging. It takes all of that. I think, and there's a small example of proof where it works. There was one family near our Hall Road who was adamantly against our project and vocalized such repeatedly. And as time wore on, our field leaders were able to, make connections with this family to the point where they both got invited for Thanksgiving dinner. And rumor has it one of them is dating the daughter.
Oh.
So, yeah, good example of a story of how it does. People do come around. Yeah. So we were proud of that, and we're proud of what we do in Aurora and Greeley and Windsor and all these other places too. And we got to get better as an industry at social media and find entry into media, period, because we don't really have many friends in that arena, and particularly in Colorado. And so we've got to build our own, and really our employees and all of you and all the people who are tied to this industry, which are well over 100,000 plus family members in Colorado at least, and across this nation, really need to stand up and advocate and be proud for what we do. Yeah. And you should be. We drive humanity. And on the question of this of
I was wondering, do you want to hand that off to one of your
social license? Sure.
Or on,
hand it off.
on the question of the fossil
fuels.
Fuel use? I mean,
if I were you, I get the hint.
I would say, Chip,
go ahead, Chip.
Thank you for that one. Man, that's a tough one. But if you look at life in general, the value that oil and gas, and when you look at, go try to go to a hospital and not use oil and gas products. I mean, go try to use something with plastics. Just think about the medicines, everything else we do every day about, and the value that creates when they're talking about, on the other side, the lung or hair or health issues. If I go through the process, and it's a very tough message. But I don't think the general person understands that. I think we have to get better at using social, messaging. Very strong with that. We learned that when we were fighting 112 last year, in the 2,500-foot setback. You need to do very well in the social messaging you're going across and the value you create. And we've let the rest of the world take over on that messaging. We're very weak on that. And the more you show the value, the more you can create value and show value that oil and gas creates value, I think it's going to help when it's all said and done. But you have to have the facts. You have to be able to do that. You have to be able to get to these people. You have to be able to get to some of those areas. And it's not an easy answer. But I do think if we will focus on a lot of that, more on the social side of getting to people and getting to the right demographics, the right people on those messages, on the value we create every day. I'm just telling you, try to go to a hospital and where people would live now and the things every day. And when you talk about premature babies and all the things that have gone on because of the oil and gas industry across the board, food delivery, transportation, the world is so much better off than we would be if it wasn't for oil and gas. And that's where you have to get to.
Okay, Britt, do you want to be on this round here?
The only thing I would add on real quick is Eric shared a bunch of numbers, and you shared some numbers from the question. I remember the spirit of the numbers, but what I really remembered was a story that Eric just told about
the Romeo and Juliet story.
Convincing some opposers to become a part of, advocates, and also the story about the work family member and his family weren't going to be able to go to Disney World. So telling the stories and engaging the community, I think, is the foundation of how we're going to get this across.
Okay, so this, I think, will be really quick. I assume it would be quick. Do you now, or have you ever considered using drone technology to perform inspections as a way to reduce worker risk and improve overall safety? And that could be yes or no.
Yes, and we do it.
Is that right?
What was it? I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part of the question.
Do you use drone technology to reduce worker risk? So the answer is
yes.
Yes. So whoever asked that question, the answer is yes.
Probably
and because of our
drone pilot that asked the question.
That could be a drone pilot. That's probably right. So I have one very quick question, which is find something you disagree on. It's an assignment more than a question. You work at different scales. You have companies in different, North Dakota, I believe, is very different from.
A little bit.
A little bit. So, and Texas is its own nation for a while. And so I'm just wondering, what about your experience? Well, it was. I mean, we can't, I'm an historian.
Yes, ma'am.
So, disagree about something. Wow. About safety and how best to achieve it, or how to deal with fossil fuel, or.
North Dakota produces better wells than Colorado.
Let me
Handsome.
hear-
Well, we only have
Now
3
it's
minutes
heating up.
left.
It's totally heating up. So, I mean, really, are you all of one mind on issues of safety and institutional culture? Is there something that next year at this conference we could say, oh, it turns out there was something that you do see differently, that you do think different ways in which you could get into social media, or just anything that you just, well, no.
You know, I don't know if we can, I mean, there's probably something we got had long enough to go through that. What I love about this industry is we share. We actually share lessons learned when it comes to safety or doing better or best management practices. It's not like I keep my stuff in my little pot over here and I don't give it to Eric or Britt if I knew it. We give that to everybody to get better in our industry. So some places that work in Colorado may not be as what we need to do in North Dakota, but we listen. I think the listening piece, the sharing piece. So Patty, I don't know if there's probably something we disagree
Yeah,
about,
so
but I love
pay
that
no
this
attention.
industry shares to get better. That's really what they want to do.
Yeah.
They want to
Yeah.
make the next generation better than they are.
Well, and when you were doing the apply the lessons thing, why would you say we're not going to
Yeah.
share that story? So I did better on that one. My first question had 17 parts, and that one was a bad
Britt did a
question, but
great
it was
job
really
answering it,
short
though.
and clear. So 1 minute each for concluding remarks or things you didn't get to say, 1 minute each.
So I'll go first, and I'll go not a minute, but a few seconds. I am very pleased to have participated in this. I not only hopefully contributed to the conversation, but I learned a lot. And it is fantastic for me to have confirmation that leaders within our industry authentically are behaving the way that I think they should. And both Chip and Eric have showed that here today. So thanks for having me.
Well, pleasure.
Likewise, thanks to Koga for inviting all of us. Britt, Chip, again, it's a pleasure. Patty as well, thank you. I'm really proud to work in this industry. I'm mostly proud of the environmental health and safety performance of this industry. We don't share the message enough. We do need to get better at that, but the underpinnings are there. It's the underpinnings of an industry that drives humanity, and we do it safe. And I'd rather do it in Colorado or even North Dakota with inferior wells, USA,
That worked out really
or
well.
Texas, USA, in a place where, to quote the EPA administrator, the United States delivers oil and gas production safer and more environmentally friendly than anybody in the world, period. And if there is an argument about fossil fuels, let's start it at home first and produce here instead of a place that ends in Stan or starts with Vladimir. And that's the United States.
Wow.
And we do it well here, and we're going to get better every day because that's who we are. And as Chip said, that's sort of this sharing and continuous improvement bias we all have. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again, Koga, for allowing us to be up here and say a few things. This industry is a very proud industry, from the guys in the field that I met last week who are so proud of doing the right thing the right way. We probably didn't do a very good job messaging, but we're a very proud industry. I love how we take, and people can take things they learned at work and use them at the house, and it makes an impact. And there's impacts on people that we don't ever know because it impacted the safety things, the things they took home in their communities as leaders to impact them. We'll never know because they did something bad didn't happen. And so I love how this organization takes that and grows people and moves them into a better person. And so, to me, it's a great industry. We give back a lot. We give, no matter whether that's dollars or whether it's time. This industry loves to give back. We live in the communities we live in, and we're respectful of that. We want to do everything the best we can, and we want to learn.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking this lively and interesting set of practitioners.